Welcome to the ArmaniTalks YouTube channel. I'm your host, ArmaniTalks. In this channel, I'm covering communication skills for you to level up your way with words, become much more articulate. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about toxic self-love. A while back, Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith were going through a lot of drama. There was this one moment when there was the infamous red table talk. This is where Jada and Will, they were having this conversation about Jada Pinkett Smith's entanglement, and here was Will just accepting it. And most of the viewers were like, Will, come on, man, get angry, show some passion, say that she was wrong, do something, quit being so freaking accepting about the situation. And there was Will, just like, nah, in a very pathetic sort of way. And in many situations, Will Smith is not always the right person in terms of exercising his behavior. Some people said he was a little too clean cut, but he was always seen as a legend, especially within his community. At that moment, though, his legend status started to get crumpled up. More time passes on by, and we all know what happened. When Chris Rock made that joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's hair, Will Smith got on stage, slapped him, and sat back down. Once again, I'm thinking, Will, what are you doing? Why are you acting like such a buffoon? And I'm sure a lot of folks were thinking the same thing. They were thinking, Will, what are you doing? Will. But notice something. It wasn't Will that was getting a lot of the backlash. Instead, it was Jada Pinkett Smith. Now, you could make the argument Jada Pinkett Smith did do a lot of bad things as well. She's the one who had the entanglement, and she was the one who rolled her eyes, which eventually led Chris Rock to getting slapped. But ultimately, if you're one of these like team accountability, like you have full control over your life, you gotta place a lot of blame on Will. Will was ultimately the guy that got up on stage and slapped Chris Rock. It was his fault. Yet, most of the public backlash was for Jada Pinkett Smith. Why? I believe the reason why was because Jada Pinkett Smith was the perfect poster boy, or you could say poster girl, for a movement that was rising. Just to give you a little understanding on Psychology 101, whenever there's something that we really dislike, we want to create a poster boy so the mind is able to identify this disgusting movement. Okay? That's just how the mind works. It likes to simplify things. If we have too much nuance with these movements, then the mind begins to overthink. One example I will give you is when comedians were stealing jokes, right? I'm sure a lot of comedians were doing it, but the person who became the poster boy was Carlos Mencia for that. Roughly around 2009, a lot of folks on YouTube started to get tired of fake gurus. And there may have been a lot of different fake gurus, but the person who became the poster boy for that movement was Dan Lok. And in 2020 to 2021, there was this thing called, I would say, toxic self-love, where these folks loved each other themselves too much to a point where it was no longer accepting one's flaws. It was acting like the flaws didn't even exist, or worse, viewing the flaws as a strength and that other people should also view it as a strength. That was when self-love became very toxic. It's like, yes, honey, I cheated on you, but it was about my feelings, right? I had to get into that entanglement because of me, right? It was me. A lot of narcissism floating around. And Jada Pinkett Smith came at that perfect time where she suddenly became the poster girl for that movement. So that's how psychology often works. Whenever we see a lot of folks displaying the same behavior, we don't individually want to think of all of these different folks. We want to just get a poster boy or a poster girl for that movement, so now we can think things through in a more efficient way. But the catch-21 is that this is not efficient by any means, because each person's scenario is radically different. Jada Pinkett Smith did shed some light into toxic self-love. And I believe to avoid this territory, You must always be in this process where your happiness is a great thing to be factored in, but you never want to lose sight of service as well. Where when you're not doing anything that's humbling you, let's say like raising a family, starting a business that's impacting others, teaching someone something, let's say you're not doing any of that and you're acting as though you live in a vacuum, that is when toxic self-love happens. And you want to be very wary about exercising this sort of behavior because you may be thinking it's self-love, but the other person views it as narcissism. A lot of narcissists have the most self-love. They have this elevated importance of oneself, and that's something that you definitely want to watch out for. Never get rid of service because service grounds you. Whatever service, where you are becoming number two to something. You love yourself, but in this dynamic, you are number two to something bigger. It could be a transaction with a customer. It could be a family dynamic. It could be whatever dynamic, but you need to be number two in some aspect of your life. Otherwise, if you're always number one, then toxic self-love is simply a byproduct. Thank you very much for joining the ArmaniTalks YouTube channel, and I'll catch you next time.